The multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each bound by laws its inhabitants never think to question, until something tears through the seams. Fire doesn't ask permission to cross dimensions. Neither does hell. Mustafar had always been a wound in the galaxy, a planet of lava rivers and obsidian cliffs, where nothing lived and nothing was meant to. It was here, in a black fortress built from the bones of a dead volcano, that the Emperor of the galaxy pursued a secret older than his throne, the conquest of death itself. Ancient Sith holocrons hummed in a chamber sealed from every eye but his own, their whispers promising rituals no living Force user had dared attempt in 1,000 years. Palpatine believed he was close. He was wrong about what he'd find. The ritual chamber reeked of ozone, and something fouler. A smell the droids assigned to monitor the room had no register for, because it didn't belong to their galaxy at all. Runes carved in black stone pulsed with an ugly crimson light as the Emperor's chant reached its final syllables, reaching not for a soul in this reality, but tearing, blindly, at the fabric between all realities, searching for a door to walk through death and back. He found one, it just wasn't his. Halfway across existence, in an alley that stank of rain and gun oil and old blood, Simmons was dying again, or living again. It was difficult to tell the difference anymore. He was Spawn now, and had been for longer than he cared to count, a Hellspawn bound by a devil's contract, wrapped in a symbiote costume that moved like a living shadow, chains coiled at his hips ready to lash out and cut a man in half. He had just finished with 3 low-level traffickers who wouldn't be finishing anything ever again, and the necroplasmic energy that fueled every part of him was humming low and satisfied in his veins. Then the alley folded in on itself. There was no portal shimmering with light, no dramatic staircase between worlds. There was only violence, the universe itself seizing him by the throat and dragging him sideways through a wound that shouldn't exist, past screaming colors and pressures that would have liquefied a mortal man's mind. Spawn had died once already. He'd survived worse than most things reality could throw at him. He gritted his teeth behind the mask and let it happen, because there was no fighting a door that had already swallowed you whole. He hit black volcanic rock hard enough to crater it. For a long moment, Spawn didn't move. Awareness came back to him in pieces. The acrid stink of sulfur, the distant roar of lava rivers, gravity pulling at him wrong, subtly wrong, like the planet itself had different rules than the one he'd left behind. He pushed himself up onto one knee, chains rattling, cape settling around his shoulders like a tattered curtain, and looked out at a horizon that had no business existing. Fire-orange skies bled into black stone mountains. Rivers of molten rock cut through the landscape like open arteries. And rising above it all, a fortress of dark durasteel that had no earthly architecture, sharp-edged, alien, built by hands that had never touched his world. "Where the hell am I?" he muttered, and meant it literally, because for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was almost certain the answer wasn't hell. That thought alone was enough to unsettle a man who'd made peace with damnation. He reached inward, the way he always did, toward the well of necroplasmic power that lived at the center of him, the same well that had let him walk through fire, shrug off bullets, regenerate wounds that would kill 10 men. It was there, but it felt distant, thin, like reaching for water through a straw instead of drinking from a river. Whatever door had dragged him here had also cut the cord tethering him to his reservoir back on Earth, back in Hell's own basement. He was running on what he had in the tank, and the tank was not being refilled. That was new. That was bad. Spawn had exactly enough time to process the implications of that fact before the ground behind him hummed with the whine of repulsor lifts, and 4 black-armored figures dropped into view, Imperial Inquisitors, sent by a fortress full of sensors that had just recorded an energy signature violent enough to make even Sith alarms scream. Crimson lightsabers ignited in the volcanic gloom, casting long shadows across obsidian rock. The lead Inquisitor, face hidden behind a black mask, not unlike Spawn's own, studied the intruder with cold curiosity. "Identify yourself," the voice demanded, distorted by the mask's vocoder. "You trespass on ground sacred to the Empire." Spawn rose to his full height, chains sliding loose from his forearms with a sound like a coffin opening. He didn't know what these people were. He didn't know what world he'd landed in, what rules governed it, or how to get home. But he knew a threat when 4 of them surrounded him with glowing swords, and he knew, with the tired certainty of a man who had died once already and come back angrier, that whatever this place was, it was about to learn exactly what it had pulled out of the dark. "Wrong question," Spawn growled, voice like gravel dragged through a grave. "You should be asking what I am." The chains struck first. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character in universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The battle that followed would be the first ripple in a war that was never meant to include him. And it would not be the last time this galaxy learned that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. The lead Inquisitor's lightsaber cut a crimson arc through the sulfur-heavy air, aimed for Spawn's throat with the precision of a killer who had never lost a duel worth remembering. It should have ended there. Most things did, against a blade that could slice through durasteel like parchment. Spawn's chain intercepted it mid-swing, wrapping the humming blade and yanking hard enough to tear the hilt from the Inquisitor's grip. The lightsaber clattered against volcanic rock and winked out, and for one suspended second, all 4 black-armored hunters simply stared. Because nothing in their training, nothing in their considerable experience purging Jedi survivors across a dozen systems, had prepared them for a weapon that could simply catch a lightsaber and hold it. "You are no Jedi," the lead Inquisitor said, more statement than question, retreating a step and reaching for a second blade at his hip. "Never said I was," Spawn answered, and closed the distance in a blur that no ordinary man's eyes should have tracked. What followed was not the elegant duel these hunters were trained for. Spawn didn't fence. He didn't parry with any respect for form or tradition. He fought the way hell had taught him to fight. Brutal, economical, designed to end things in the fewest possible seconds. Because seconds were currency he no longer had in abundance. A chain lashed out and shattered a second Inquisitor's blade arm at the elbow. His cape, more living creature than cloth, snapped forward like a whip and sent a third staggering into a lava fissure that closed over him with a hiss of steam and silence. The remaining 2 Inquisitors adjusted, falling back into a coordinated force-assisted stance, leaping, using telekinesis to hurl chunks of obsidian rock the size of speeder cars. Spawn caught one midair with both fists, absorbing the impact through gritted teeth and a spike of pain that told him, with unwelcome clarity, exactly how much of his reserve that block had cost him. He was burning through power faster fighting here than he ever had back home. Something about this place drank from him even as he moved through it, some deep incompatibility between the necroplasm in his veins and whatever strange, star-born energy hummed beneath this galaxy's version of magic. He didn't have time to think about why. He only had time to survive it. The last standing Inquisitor made a critical mistake. He reached out with the Force to crush Spawn's chest, the way he'd crushed lesser men 100 times before, fingers curling into a fist, meant to stop a heart. Spawn felt the invisible grip close around his ribs, felt it, and laughed, low and humorless, because a heart that had already stopped once couldn't be stopped again the same way. "Wrong guy," he rasped, and drove a fist through the Inquisitor's chest plate, hard enough to end the fight permanently. Silence returned to Mustafar, broken only by the distant boil of lava and the tick of cooling durasteel, where a lightsaber hilt had melted half into rock. Spawn stood alone amid the wreckage of 4 elite hunters, breathing hard, not from exhaustion of muscle, but from the deeper, more troubling exhaustion of a well running low. He didn't get long to consider it. A presence arrived that made the volcanic air itself feel colder, heavier, wrong in a way the Inquisitors hadn't been. Footsteps, mechanical, rhythmic, accompanied by a sound like a life support system breathing for a man who should have died decades ago, echoed from the fortress entrance. Spawn turned to find a figure in black armor, taller than any man had a right to be, a cape of his own sweeping behind him, a lightsaber crimson as fresh blood humming to life in one gauntleted fist. Darth Vader had felt the disturbance the moment it tore through the dark side. A presence that registered in the Force not as light, not as darkness, but as something the Force itself seemed to recoil from, an absence wearing the shape of a man. He had come expecting a Jedi, some pathetic remnant hiding in the ashes of the Purge. He found something else entirely. "You are not of this galaxy," Vader said. It wasn't a question. His mechanical voice carried none of the surprise a normal man might have shown at the sight of 4 dead Inquisitors and a stranger wreathed in chains. But something in his stance, a fractional stillness, a recalibration, suggested he understood he was looking at an anomaly worth taking seriously. Spawn's glowing eyes narrowed behind his mask, sizing up the new arrival the way he sized up every threat. For weaknesses, for tells, for the fastest route to ending a fight before it could cost him what he didn't have to spare. This one felt different from the others. Heavier, colder. Whatever dark power moved through this galaxy, this man swam in it like it was home. "You got that right," Spawn said. "And I'd love to stick around and chat, but I got places to be. Preferably ones that don't smell like your planet's armpit." "You misunderstand," Vader replied, igniting his blade fully, the crimson light throwing long shadows across the black stone. "You are not leaving." Spawn's chains rattled loose again, blades sliding free at their tips, necroplasmic energy crackling faintly along his forearms. Less than it should have been, but enough, for now. "Funny," he growled. "Everybody keeps telling me that." Behind Vader, unseen by either combatant, a hooded figure watched from the fortress balcony above, patient, calculating, already reconsidering the shape of an experiment centuries in the making. The Emperor of the Galaxy had wanted a door to immortality. He had gotten something far more interesting, proof that death itself could be circumvented, walking and breathing and standing in his own front yard. Palpatine smiled, thin and cold, and reached for his comm. Vader moved first, closing the distance in a burst of force-augmented speed that would have turned an ordinary man into a red smear against the volcanic rock. His blade came down in a diagonal arc, meant to split Spawn from shoulder to hip. A killing stroke, honed across 100 duels against Jedi who had spent their lives training for exactly this moment, and still hadn't been fast enough. Spawn wasn't a Jedi. He didn't have decades of lightsaber philosophy telling him how this exchange was supposed to go, and that ignorance, strange as it was, worked in his favor. He simply moved, twisting sideways with the boneless economy of a man who had learned to dodge bullets in a country where bullets came from every direction, and let the crimson blade hiss past close enough to singe the edge of his cape. His counter came fast, a chain, blade-tipped, lashing toward Vader's throat. Vader caught it on his own weapon, the lightsaber slicing clean through the links, and used the opening to drive a force push that should have sent Spawn cratering into the fortress wall 30 meters back. Spawn skidded, boots gouging trenches in the black stone, but held his ground, barely. He felt that push in his bones, felt the cost of resisting it burn through his reserve like acid, another chunk of power gone just to stay upright. He was beginning to understand, with the cold clarity of a man doing math he didn't like the answer to, that every exchange here cost him more than it should. Whatever strange gravity this galaxy's dark side exerted, it treated his necroplasm like a foreign substance the world itself was trying to reject, burning it away faster than combat alone should account for. He didn't have unlimited time to figure out why. He had, by his rough internal count, maybe a fraction of what he usually carried into a fight like this. "You fight like something that has already died," Vader said, circling, his voice carrying a note that might have been curiosity beneath the mechanical rasp. "And yet you stand." "Yeah, I get that a lot," Spawn said, chains recoiling, blades sliding back into readiness. "Death's not really a permanent condition where I'm from." That earned him a pause, small, almost imperceptible, but real. Vader had spent decades as a creature stitched together by machinery, and will, after a fire should have killed him. He knew something about refusing to stay dead. For half a second, something almost like recognition passed between the two of them. Two men who had each, in their own broken ways, cheated the grave. Then Vader attacked again, and philosophy gave way to violence. The fight that followed tore chunks out of the fortress approach. Chains meeting lightsaber, force-thrown boulders meeting fists that hit hard enough to crack them mid-air. Spawn's necroplasmic blades left scorch marks that glowed sickly green against black stone, utterly unlike the clean, cauterized lines of a lightsaber wound. Vader, for his part, fought with a controlled fury Spawn hadn't expected. Testing, probing, learning the shape of this new threat with every exchange, rather than simply trying to end it, the way a scientist might study a specimen, even while trying to kill it. It was that curiosity, more than anything, that kept Spawn alive through the next several minutes. Vader wasn't fighting to finish him quickly. He was fighting to understand him. And in that gap between intention and execution, Spawn found the openings he needed to survive. He couldn't say the same about winning. By the time Vader finally drove him back against the fortress's outer wall, one boot planted on Spawn's chest, lightsaber humming an inch from his masked face, Spawn's necroplasm had thinned to a dangerous ebb, the glow beneath his costume dimming, chains moving sluggish where they'd once snapped like whips. He'd fought demons in hell that hit softer than this. He'd fought corrupt cops and street gangs and things wearing human skin that weren't human at all, and none of it had drained him like 90 seconds against one man in black armor. "Your power fades," Vader observed, blade steady, voice edged with something that in another man might have been satisfaction. "This galaxy does not sustain you." "No kidding," Spawn wheezed, chains bracing weakly against the boot pinning him. He expected the killing blow. He'd made peace with dying. Hell, he'd already done it once, and the second time hadn't been much better, so a third didn't scare him the way it should have. What he didn't expect was for Vader to simply stop. The blade retracted a fraction. The boot lifted. "The Emperor," Vader said, "will want to see this for himself." It wasn't mercy. Spawn understood that immediately, understood it the way he understood every predator he'd ever faced. This wasn't a man sparing an enemy. This was a man recognizing a resource too valuable to waste in a fortress courtyard. Somewhere above them, the hooded figure who'd been watching from the balcony was already descending, already reaching, already calculating exactly how much use a dying god from another reality might have before he finished dying for good. Spawn, on his knees on alien volcanic rock, power guttering low in his veins, understood one more thing with total clarity. He had walked out of hell once already, and he would be damned, again if necessary, before he let some new devil in a black cloak claim ownership of what was left of him. The throne room the Emperor kept on Mustafar bore little resemblance to the polished chamber on Coruscant, where he held court before the Senate's ghost and a galaxy of frightened bureaucrats. This room was older, cruder, built for purposes that had nothing to do with governance. Black stone walls absorbed light rather than reflected it. Sith artifacts lined alcoves like trophies, cracked holocrons, a rusted blade older than the Republic itself, fragments of armor worn by men whose names had been deliberately erased from history. It was a room built for one thing, the pursuit of power that outlasted death. Spawn was dragged into it in restraints that would have held a rancor, a containment field layered with dark side wards the Emperor's own hand had etched, humming with a frequency designed to suppress the Force. It did nothing to touch necroplasm, which wasn't the Force at all, but it didn't need to. Spawn's reserve was already thin enough that he barely had the strength to stand upright, let alone break free. He let himself be marched forward, cataloging exits, guards, weaknesses, patient the way a caged predator is patient, waiting, not broken. The Emperor rose from a throne carved from black volcanic glass, robes pooling like spilled ink, and studied his prisoner with eyes that held none of Vader's cold curiosity and all of a much older, hungrier interest. "Fascinating," Palpatine said, voice a dry rasp that seemed to enjoy the sound of its own cruelty. "4 of my Inquisitors dead, my finest apprentice pressed to his limits. And yet you are not of the Force at all, are you? I can feel it now, up close. You are something else, something that has died and returned and paid a price for the privilege. You want an autograph or something?" Spawn growled, testing the restraints with a fractional shift of his shoulders, feeling the field bite back with a jolt that told him it was At minimum, competently built. Palpatine's thin lips curved. I want to know how you did it. Death is the one enemy I have never fully conquered, Spawn of Simmons. He'd learned the name somehow, plucked it perhaps from the fractured thoughts leaking off a mind under duress, and the casual violation of it made something cold curl in Spawn's gut. And you stand before me as living proof that it can be undone. That is worth more to me than your death, for now. There's a catch, Spawn said. There was always a catch. He'd signed the contract that made him what he was, and he'd spent every day since paying interest on that decision. He recognized the shape of another devil's bargain when one was being offered, even dressed in different robes. There is no catch, Palpatine said, which was of course a lie, and both of them knew it. There is only opportunity. Cooperate. Allow my researchers to study the nature of your resurrection, the mechanism that sustains you between worlds, and I will see to it that you are returned home, restored to full power, compensated beyond your imagining. Refuse, and I will simply take what I need regardless. The only variable is whether you leave this facility whole, or in pieces, sufficient for study. Spawn had heard variations of this speech before, in different words, from different mouths. From Malebolgia offering him command of Hell's armies, in exchange for his soul's obedience. From corrupt men in expensive suits, offering him money and silence in exchange for looking away from atrocities. The words changed. The shape of the bargain never did. Power offered a leash disguised as a gift, and men foolish enough to reach for it always found the collar tightened afterward. Here's my counteroffer, Spawn said, voice flat and dangerous, despite the restraints humming against his wrists. You let me go, I don't turn this pretty little throne room into a crater, and we both pretend this conversation never happened. The Emperor's smile didn't waver. If anything, it deepened, delighted by the defiance, the way a man might be delighted by a specimen behaving exactly as predicted. Admirable. Foolish, but admirable. Lord Vader. He turned slightly toward the black-armored figure standing sentinel near the chamber's edge. Prepare the containment cell, and summon Dr. Silo's research division. We have much work ahead of us. Vader inclined his head, but something in the set of his shoulders suggested a thought he chose not to voice. A fractional hesitation Spawn caught and filed away, the same way he'd caught the pause on the battlefield. Vader had recognized something in him. Whatever calculations moved behind that black mask, they weren't entirely aligned with his master's hunger. As guards moved to escort him from the throne room, restraints biting deeper with every step, Spawn's glowing eyes swept the chamber one final time, mapping it, memorizing it, filing away every exit and every guard position with the patience of a man who had learned, across 2 lifetimes and 1 damnation, that the moment to fight back was never the moment your captors expected it. He didn't have his full power. He didn't have a way home, but he had survived Hell itself, and Hell, he was increasingly certain, had prepared him for exactly men like this. The cell doors sealed behind him with a hiss of pressurized air, and in the darkness, Spawn began, quietly, to plan. The containment cell was a black cube deep beneath Mustafar's fortress, its walls lined with the same dark side dampening technology that had held him since the throne room. Designed, Spawn suspected, by minds that had spent decades perfecting ways to break force-sensitive prisoners. It wasn't built for him. That much became clear within the first hour, when he began testing the field's edges and found gaps in its logic, seams meant to suppress a kind of power he simply didn't use. What the cell did do, however, was starve him slowly of the one thing keeping him functional at all. Necroplasm didn't work the way the Force did. It didn't flow from some ambient galactic wellspring available to anyone attuned to reach for it. It came from a specific source, a reservoir tied to Malebolgia's throne in Hell, a place that existed nowhere in this galaxy's cosmology, connected to Spawn by a tether that had been severed the moment the Emperor's ritual dragged him sideways through reality. Every movement, every flex of strength beyond what an ordinary man could manage, drew down a well that had no way to refill. He'd known it in the abstract, since Mustafar's volcanic ground first met his back. Sitting alone in a cell with nothing to do but feel his own power fade by degrees, made it real in a way abstraction never could. The glow beneath his costume, usually a fierce green white, had dimmed to something closer to embers. His chains, when he tested them, moved with visible effort now instead of predatory ease. He was, for the first time in longer than he cared to remember, approaching something close to human. That thought terrified him more than the Emperor's throne room had. He needed a solution, and pacing a 6-meter cell gave him plenty of time to consider one. Necroplasm fed on violence, suffering, strong emotion, the darker undercurrents of a world in pain. He'd never needed to think much about the mechanics of it back home. Earth supplied plenty of raw material for a being built from Hell's own currency. This galaxy ran on something different. The Force, light and dark, wasn't the same fuel. But dark side energy wasn't nothing either. It was born from anger, fear, suffering. Emotional register close enough to what necroplasm craved that Spawn had felt something, however faint, respond in him during the fight against Vader. A trickle. Barely a sip, but a sip was better than starvation. If he could find a way to draw more directly from concentrated dark side sources, the kind radiating off a place like this fortress, saturated in decades of Sith ritual and cruelty, he might be able to slow the bleeding, maybe even reverse it. It wasn't home. It wasn't clean. Every fragment of that stolen power would come laced with something that didn't belong to him, some borrowed cruelty riding shotgun in his veins. He didn't love the idea of feeding on darkness that wasn't his own to metabolize. He liked the alternative, becoming a corpse in an Imperial research vault, even less. The cell door hissed open sooner than he expected. Not guards. Vader, alone, filling the doorway with the particular stillness of a man who had come to have a conversation his master hadn't authorized. "You're not here to escort me to Dr. Silo," Spawn said, not moving from where he sat against the far wall, conserving what little he had left. "No," Vader agreed. The door sealed behind him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Two damaged things measuring each other across a small dark room. "I have studied resurrection for decades, in my own way. Machinery instead of magic. A body rebuilt from wreckage because the alternative was extinction. I understand, better than most in this galaxy, what it costs to refuse death's terms. Is there a point coming, or is this just story time?" "The point," Vader said, voice flattening, "is that my master will consume what you are until nothing useful remains, and discard the rest. I have seen him do it to men with far less to offer than you. Cooperation buys you nothing but a slower ending. And you're telling me this because you're a great guy underneath the mask?" Something in Vader's stance shifted. Not quite a flinch, but close to one. The ghost of a man who had once believed himself capable of being called that, a long time ago, before choices that couldn't be unmade. "I am telling you because a weapon my master does not control is more useful to me than one he does. Escape this cell, and I will not stand in your way. What you do afterward, whether you fight, whether you flee, whether you find your way home, is your own affair." Spawn studied him for a long moment, the offer sitting between them like a blade neither had drawn yet. He'd learned the hard way that offers made in dark rooms by powerful men always came with fine print, and Vader's fine print was easy enough to read. He wasn't being freed out of kindness. He was being loosed like a weapon aimed at someone else's throne, in the hope that the resulting chaos served ends only Vader himself understood. That was fine. Spawn had made worse bargains for better reasons. "You open that door," he said, rising slowly to his feet, embers of necroplasm stirring faint but present along his forearms. "And get out of my way when I do." Vader turned toward the cell's control panel without another word, and somewhere above them, in a black glass throne room, the Emperor remained blissfully unaware that his prize experiment was about to become a very personal problem. The dampening field died with a sound like a held breath finally released, and Spawn felt his chains snap taut with renewed intent, even before his mind caught up to his body's readiness. Vader had already turned away by the time the cell door slid open, his cape a black wake disappearing down the corridor toward the fortress's upper levels, leaving no further words behind. Whatever game he was playing, he'd made his move. The rest was Spawn's problem now. escaping a fortress running on unfamiliar technology, guarded by soldiers he'd never trained against, powered by a body running on fumes, should have been close to impossible. Spawn had built a career, in life and in death both, out of making impossible things happen anyway. He moved through Mustafar's lower levels like smoke through a cracked window, silent when silence served him, violent when it didn't, chains finding throats and blaster rifles before their owners could raise an alarm. Every kill, every subdued guard, cost him a fraction of the ember-thin power he had left. He rationed it like a man counting the last coins in his pocket, spending only what he had to. He made it 3 levels up before the alarms found him anyway. Klaxons blared crimson through the fortress's black corridors, and stormtrooper squads began flooding in from side passages with the drilled efficiency of soldiers who trained for exactly this scenario. Spawn ducked into a maintenance alcove, breathing hard behind his mask, doing the math on how many more fights he had left in him before the well ran dry entirely. The answer wasn't reassuring. It was in that alcove, pinned by advancing search patterns, that he first heard the voice. "You're not Imperial," a woman's voice, low, urgent, coming from a service hatch half hidden behind a coolant conduit. When Spawn turned, chains half raised, he found a face peering out at him. Young, sharp-eyed, wearing the patched flight suit of someone who had no business being this deep inside an Imperial fortress uninvited. "And you're not a prisoner anymore either, from the look of it. Which means you're either the most interesting distraction I've ever seen, or you're about to get both of us killed. I'm betting on both. Depends how good your exits are," Spawn rasped. "Better than your odds of finding one alone." She jerked her head toward the hatch. "Rebel Alliance recon. We've had eyes on this facility for 3 weeks, trying to figure out what the Empire's building down here. Whatever you are, you just turned our surveillance op into an extraction op. Move." Spawn didn't trust easily. Hadn't trusted easily since long before hell had gotten its hooks into him. But a stranger offering a way out of a fortress crawling with soldiers who wanted him dissected was, at minimum, a more attractive option than staying to find out how many more waves the Empire could throw at him. He folded himself through the hatch, chains retracting tight against his frame, and followed her into a service duct barely wide enough for the 2 of them. "Name's Rel," she said, moving fast through the cramped dark, voice pitched low. "You got one?" "Spawn." "That a rank or a warning?" "Bit of both." They moved through the fortress's forgotten arteries, maintenance shafts, coolant tunnels, the unglamorous infrastructure that kept a facility like this alive, and that nobody bothered guarding as heavily as the front door. Rel moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd mapped these tunnels the hard way, over weeks of patient, dangerous reconnaissance. Spawn moved with the desperate economy of a man rationing every last drop of what made him more than an ordinary soldier, bleeding out in the dark. They didn't make it to the surface clean. A squad of troopers caught them at a junction 2 levels from an exit hatch. Rel swore led to a hidden speeder cache, and Spawn spent nearly the last of his reserve clearing the path, chains and fists, and the raw brutality of a man who'd learned violence in worse places than this, dropping 6 soldiers in under a minute, while Rel provided cover fire from a blaster pistol that looked older than she was. By the time they broke into open air on Mustafar's surface, lava glow painting the horizon in hellish orange that felt almost like home, Spawn's necroplasm had burned down to something perilously close to nothing. His chains hung heavy. The glow beneath his costume had gone the dull color of a dying ember. He'd survived. He wasn't sure how much further that survival could carry him without something to refill the well. Rel hauled him toward a battered speeder hidden beneath camouflage netting, throwing a glance over her shoulder at the fortress they'd just escaped, alarms still screaming into the volcanic night behind them. "Whatever you are," she said, gunning the engine, "the Alliance is going to have a lot of questions." "Get in line," Spawn muttered, and let the darkness at the edges of his vision close in as the speeder tore away from Mustafar's burning skyline, carrying him toward a war he hadn't asked to be part of, and a rebellion that had no idea what it had just picked up. The rebel outpost was little more than a scattering of prefab shelters bolted into the hollow of a rock canyon on a moon 3 systems from Mustafar, chosen for its useless mineral readings and its distance from any hyperspace lane worth patrolling. Spawn came back to something like awareness, stretched out on a cot in a medbay that smelled of bacta and recycled air. Chains coiled loose and inert at his sides like a snake too tired to strike. He'd burned closer to empty than he'd ever come in his existence as a Hellspawn. The ember glow beneath his costume had steadied, faintly, in the hours since Rel's speeder had jumped them out of Mustafar's gravity well. Proof that whatever thin trickle of dark side residue he'd managed to draw during the fortress escape had bought him a little breathing room. Not recovery, just enough to keep breathing. "You're awake." Rel leaned in the medbay doorway, arms crossed, studying him with the same sharp assessment she'd used back in that maintenance duct. Behind her, Spawn could make out other figures gathering in the corridor beyond. Soldiers, officers, at least one protocol droid hovering with obvious anxiety at the edge of the group, all of them trying very hard to look like they weren't staring at the thing from another reality currently occupying their medbay. "You always drag half-dead strangers back to your secret base," Spawn rasped, sitting up slowly, testing muscles that felt hollowed out. "Or am I special? You're the first thing I've seen kill 4 Inquisitors and walk away half alive," Rel said. "That earns you a conversation, at minimum, before anyone decides what to do with you." The conversation, when it came, happened in a cramped briefing room, lit by the blue glow of a holotable, in front of a small council of Alliance officers, who regarded Spawn with the careful neutrality of people who had survived long enough in this war to know that gift horses often bit. He told them what he could. The ritual, the rift, the reservoir cut off somewhere beyond this galaxy's reach, the necroplasm burning down toward empty with every fight. He left out the parts that wouldn't have made sense to explain, the deals with devils and the debts owed to hell itself. Some truths didn't translate across dimensions any better than his power did. "So you're stranded," said a gray-haired officer near the holotable's edge, arms folded, "cut off from whatever fuels you, in a galaxy at war, with the Empire now aware you exist, and eager to dissect you for the privilege of copying whatever you are. That about summarize it?" "Pretty much," Spawn said. "And you expect us to help you?" "I don't expect anything," Spawn said, meeting the officer's gaze evenly. "I've been let down by better people than you, in worse situations than this. But your fortress friend Vader let me walk instead of feeding me to his boss, and your recon girl pulled me out of a hole I might not have climbed out of alone. So I'm not exactly drowning in reasons to trust anybody in this galaxy, but I'm not drowning in reasons to walk away yet either." The officer's expression didn't soften, but something in the room's tension eased fractionally. The recognition, perhaps, of an honest answer in a war that had taught everyone present to distrust easy promises. "The Alliance doesn't have resources to spare chasing miracles," she said. "But we don't turn away anyone who's bled fighting the Empire either. And you've done more damage to Palpatine's black site research in one afternoon than 3 of our infiltration teams combined. That buys you shelter. Maybe more, if you're willing to earn it." "Earn it how?" "The Empire won't stop hunting you," she said flatly. "Vader let you go for his own reasons, not out of charity. Which means the moment those reasons stop serving him, he'll come collect what's his again. If you fight alongside us, you're a much harder target to isolate. If you disappear on your own, you're one lost, wounded stranger against an empire with unlimited resources and a personal interest in taking you apart." Spawn turned that over, chains shifting faintly at his hips, the calculation as old as every deal he'd ever regretted making. He didn't owe this war anything. He didn't owe this galaxy anything. His only real goal, buried under all the fighting and fleeing since he'd woken up on Mustafar's volcanic rock, was finding some way back to the world where his reservoir still waited, untouched, on the other side of a door he had no idea how to reopen. But surviving long enough to find that door meant surviving the Empire's hunt in the meantime. And surviving, in his considerable experience, was almost always easier with allies at your back, even allies whose war wasn't his, in a galaxy that wasn't his, fighting for a cause he hadn't chosen and didn't fully understand. "I'm not signing up for your uniform," Spawn said finally. "I don't salute. I don't follow orders I don't like. And the second I find a way home, I'm gone. No goodbyes." "Understood," the officer said, something almost like respect flickering across her weathered face. "But until then," Spawn added, voice dropping low, chains settling with the quiet finality of a decision made, "your empire's about to learn there are worse things in the dark than the Sith." Outside the briefing room, unnoticed by anyone present, a modified probe droid drifted past the outpost's outer sensor net, relaying a faint but unmistakable signature back toward an Imperial listening post 3 systems away, and toward a black glass throne room where a patient, hungry old man had just been handed the first thread leading back to his stolen prize. The probe droid's signal reached Mustafar within the hour, and by the time Palpatine finished reviewing the intercepted telemetry, his patience, thin to begin with, worn thinner by the humiliation of losing his prize specimen to his own apprentice's carelessness, had curdled into something colder and far more dangerous than anger. He did not summon Vader to demand an explanation. He already suspected the shape of the betrayal. Men who had once been Jedi rarely lost the instinct to make their own choices, however deeply buried beneath armor and obedience. What he wanted now was correction, not conversation. "Lord Vader," the Emperor's hologram said, flickering blue in the dim solitude of Vader's private meditation chamber. "Our asset has been located. A rebel outpost, moon designation unlisted, 3 systems coreward of Mustafar. You will retrieve him personally. And this time, Lord Vader, there will be no further accidents." The weight in that final word left no ambiguity. Vader inclined his head, the gesture giving away nothing of the calculation running beneath his mask, a calculation that had nothing to do with obedience and everything to do with opportunity. He had freed Spawn not from mercy, which was a currency he no longer possessed in any meaningful supply, but from a colder logic. A weapon his master did not fully control was worth more to Vader than one his master did. Now that weapon had found allies, found purpose, found a war to bleed into. That made him more useful, not less. It also made the coming confrontation considerably more complicated. Aboard his Star Destroyer, cutting through hyperspace toward the coordinates his master had provided, Vader found himself running through possibilities that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. Possibilities that tasted, faintly and unwelcome, like the ghost of a man he'd once been. He could deliver Spawn to the Emperor as ordered, securing his own position and denying his master nothing. Or he could arrange, quietly, for the outpost's warning systems to detect his fleet's arrival, just early enough for evacuation, buying Spawn and his newfound allies time to scatter before Imperial boots hit the ground. Neither choice was without cost. Neither choice was without risk. Vader had spent 20 years telling himself that risk and cost were luxuries he'd surrendered, along with everything else the fire had taken from him on this same volcanic world. Standing now in the cold silence of his meditation chamber, he was no longer entirely certain that was true. On the moon below, Spawn felt the shift in the air before any sensor confirmed it. A wrongness prickling at instincts, honed across 2 lifetimes of violence. The particular stillness that preceded catastrophe. He was in the outpost's makeshift armory, working through what remained of his strength with Rel at his side, cataloging what few weapons and resources the rebels could spare, when the alarm finally sounded. Thin, mechanical, entirely inadequate to the scale of what was descending toward them. "Imperial fleet, coreward approach," came the panicked voice over the outpost comm. "Multiple Star Destroyers. They found us." "They found me," Spawn corrected grimly, already moving, chains sliding free. Rel didn't argue the distinction. There wasn't time. The outpost dissolved into organized chaos around them. Evacuation shuttles scrambling from hidden bays. Defensive positions manned by soldiers who'd trained for exactly this nightmare scenario and still felt the fear of it settling cold in their guts. Officers barking coordinates for a fighting retreat that everyone present understood was the best outcome available, not the outcome anyone wanted. Spawn found the gray-haired officer from the briefing room directing the evacuation with brutal efficiency, and something in her expression when she spotted him told him everything he needed to know before she spoke a word. "They're not here for the outpost," she said. "Sensor sweeps already confirmed it. Every ship in that fleet is vectoring toward your position specifically. You're the target. We're just in the blast radius." Then get your people out, Spawn said. I'll buy you the time. That's not a viable. Wasn't asking permission. He was already moving toward the canyon's mouth, toward the wide open ground where an army of stormtroopers would soon be pouring from descending transports, chains coiling with the last reserves of power he had left to spend. He had exactly enough necroplasm remaining, by his own grim calculation, for one significant fight. Maybe, if he was disciplined. If luck, which had abandoned him more often than it had favored him across 2 lifetimes, decided to make an exception today. He didn't need to win. He'd learned that lesson in enough desperate fights to trust it completely. He just needed to make himself expensive enough, loud enough, dangerous enough, that an empire hungry to take him alive would hesitate to simply level the canyon and sort through the wreckage afterward. Every minute he bought was a minute more of the outpost's people reaching those evacuation shuttles. Above him, the sky began to darken with the shadow of descending Imperial transports. And somewhere among that armada, Vader wrestled with a choice he'd never expected to face twice in one lifetime. Whether the last thing worth saving in himself was worth the price of finally choosing it. The transports hit the canyon floor in a synchronized wave, ramps dropping before repulsors had fully cut out. Disgorging white-armored soldiers in numbers, the outpost's meager defenses had no realistic hope of matching. Spawn stood alone at the canyon's mouth, chains coiled and ready, necroplasm burning low and precious in his veins, and did the only thing that had ever made sense to him in situations exactly this hopeless. He attacked first. The fight that followed was not a battle so much as a controlled detonation. Spawn moved through the initial wave of stormtroopers like a force of nature given a grudge, chains finding throats and weapons alike, blades opening gaps in formations that had been drilled to withstand conventional assault and simply weren't built to withstand him. Blaster bolts scorched past his shoulders, a few finding their mark and searing through the symbiote costume to blacken flesh beneath. Wounds that would have dropped an ordinary man, that merely slowed him, fed as he was on the last dregs of a reserve he was spending with the desperate abandon of a man who no longer expected to need it afterward. Behind the advancing lines, evacuation shuttles roared skyward from the outpost's hidden bays, one after another, carrying soldiers and officers, and a wide-eyed protocol droid toward the relative safety of open space. Rel's voice crackled once through his comm, tight and urgent. 3 shuttles away, then 2, then 1, and Spawn fought on, buying seconds with everything he had left, because seconds were the only currency this fight had ever really been about. It was Vader who finally ended the improvised chaos, descending from his personal shuttle with the deliberate weight of a man arriving to settle something long overdue. Stormtroopers parted around him without needing to be ordered. Spawn, chest heaving, ember glow flickering dangerously low beneath scorched fabric, turned to face him across ground already littered with the wreckage of the fight that had come before. "You could have stopped this," Spawn said. "Could have let that fleet find nothing but an empty canyon." "I considered it," Vader admitted, and the honesty in it was its own kind of confession, quiet and heavy in the volcanic-tinged air, even this far from Mustafar. "My master does not forgive failure twice. There are costs I am no longer willing to bear on behalf of a stranger's freedom." Convenient timing on that decision. Perhaps. Vader's blade ignited, crimson light throwing long shadows across cratered ground. But know this, the outcome of what follows was never truly in doubt from the moment my master set his intentions upon you. What remains to be decided is only how much is destroyed in the reaching. Spawn's chains rattled loose one final time, power guttering like a candle in a hurricane, and he understood with total clarity that he did not have enough left to win this fight in any conventional sense. He had enough, perhaps, to make losing costly. He had enough to make sure that whatever the Emperor collected today, it wouldn't be the prize intact and grateful. He had enough, above all, to buy the last shuttle the seconds it needed to clear the canyon. The duel that followed was shorter and uglier than their first meeting on Mustafar's volcanic ground. 2 exhausted combatants trading blows with the diminishing precision of men running on fumes rather than strength. Each mistake costing more than it should have. Each exchange a step closer to an ending neither of them could fully predict. Spawn took a lightsaber graze across his ribs that should have ended him and merely staggered him instead. some last stubborn ember of necroplasm cauterizing the wound even as it drained the well bone dry. Vader, for his part, absorbed a chain strike to the chest plate hard enough to crack durasteel, staggering back a step for the first time since the fight had begun. It was in that staggered moment, Vader off balance, Spawn empty of everything but will, that the last evacuation shuttle finally screamed past overhead, clearing the canyon's ridge and vanishing into the pale sky toward waiting hyperspace coordinates. Rel's voice crackled one final time across a comm Spawn could barely hear anymore, over the roar of his own pulse. "We're clear, all of us. Get out if you can." He couldn't. He'd known that the moment he'd chosen to stand at the canyon's mouth, instead of climbing aboard a shuttle himself. But the people he'd bought time for were gone, safe, beyond this Empire's reach for now. And for a man who had spent 2 lifetimes measuring his worth in exactly that kind of trade, it was, in the end, enough. Vader straightened, lightsaber raised, and studied the wounded, depleted figure before him with something that might, in another life, have been called respect. "It's done," Spawn said, chains hanging heavy and near lifeless at his sides, voice a rasp scraped raw. "Do what you came here to do." For a long moment, Vader didn't move at all. The moment stretched, volcanic wind from nowhere in particular, stirring dust across cratered ground. Stormtroopers holding position at a distance, because none of them, not even now, fully understood what they were looking at. Vader's blade remained raised. Spawn remained standing, barely, chains hanging dead weight, the ember glow beneath his ruined costume guttering toward true darkness for the first time since he'd fallen through a tear in reality onto this galaxy's volcanic doorstep. Then, slowly, Vader lowered his weapon. "Report to my master," he said, turning toward the nearest stormtrooper commander, voice carrying the flat, absolute authority that had never once been questioned in 20 years of service, that the asset perished in the engagement. Consumed by his own power, as anticipated, nothing recoverable remains. The commander hesitated exactly as long as anyone who valued breathing would hesitate before questioning Darth Vader's account of events, then saluted and turned to relay the fabricated report. Spawn, swaying where he stood, understood the gift being extended to him with the same clarity he'd understood every other bargain struck across 2 lifetimes. This one, unlike most, asked for nothing in return but his absence. "Why?" Spawn managed, the single word costing him more than it should have. "Because I remember," Vader said, quiet enough that only Spawn could hear it, "what it is to have a choice taken from you entirely. I will not be the instrument that takes yours as well. Not today." He turned and walked back toward his shuttle without another word, leaving Spawn alone amid the wreckage of a fight that had, against every reasonable expectation, ended in something other than his death. The stormtroopers withdrawing behind their commander's orders, the canyon slowly emptying of Imperial presence, leaving only silence and smoke, and a lone figure who would need every remaining scrap of will just to stay upright until help arrived. Rel found him an hour later, guided back by a scout ship that had circled at a cautious distance until the Imperial fleet finally broke orbit and vanished into hyperspace. She said nothing about the empty canyon, the absence of any body the Empire might have claimed, the strange mercy that had apparently spared him. Some silences didn't need filling. In the weeks that followed, in the shadow of a war that continued whether or not he chose to fight in it, Spawn began the long, uncertain work of rebuilding what little strength this galaxy allowed him to reclaim, drawing thin trickles of sustenance from the dark corners of a conflict that offered no shortage of suffering to feed on, however little he liked the taste of it. He was no soldier of the rebellion and made no promises about how long he'd stay. But for now, in a galaxy that wasn't his, fighting a war that wasn't his, he had found something he hadn't expected to find this far from home. A reason, however small, to keep standing. Somewhere on Mustafar, an old man on a throne of black glass filed away his failure and began planning his next attempt, patient as only the truly damned can be. The multiverse had bent to admit one lost soul into a war of stars, and the stars themselves had not yet decided what to make of him. The multiverse is infinite. More stories await.